If you think you're truly alone in the deep woods, you are dead wrong. I honestly thought I was basically untouchable out there. Years of solo trips, hundreds of trail miles, never once felt genuinely threatened. Then a single afternoon in the Blue Ridge Mountains dismantled all of that piece by piece and left something in its place I still haven't been able to name. I need to back up. It was October 2022. I was 29, 3 days into a 6-day loop out of the Peaks of Otter trailhead on the Blue Ridge Parkway in Bedford County, Virginia. The kind of trip where your shoulders finally stop carrying the week and your brain goes quiet. Leaf season, low crowds, long golden light cutting through the hardwoods. By the end of that 3rd day, I had figured out what was following me. I wish the figuring out had made me feel better. The wrong turn happened at a junction where the blaze markers had faded almost completely into the bark. I went left when I should have gone right, and I didn't realize it for almost 40 minutes. I was correcting course, annoyed at myself, pushing a little harder than usual to make up the lost time, when something made me glance back. A man, maybe 200 feet behind me, standard pack, trekking poles, nothing remarkable. I told myself, other hiker, same trail, pure coincidence. I picked up my pace. I checked again at the next bend. He was still there. Closer now, but not dramatically closer. Like he'd matched my acceleration without thinking. I marked the distance in my head, roughly 50 feet. I didn't tell myself it was fine. That's what I want you to understand. Something in my gut had already started pulling the alarm. I kept walking. What I still can't fully explain is the precision of it. Not 55 feet, not 40. Every time I checked. Across a stream crossing, up a switchback, along a flat ridgeline section where I could see a quarter mile behind me, he was exactly 50 feet back, like he was using a laser rangefinder. Like the distance was the point. I tried everything short of stopping completely. I slowed to a crawl. He slowed. I surged up a steep climb. He surged. When I reached a wide, flat section and broke into an actual jog with a full 35-pound pack on my back, he jogged too. He never tried to pass me. He never called out. He just maintained that precise mechanical interval, and the silence of it was worse than anything he could have said. The rhododendron thicket came up on my left maybe 20 minutes later. The kind of dense Appalachian tangle that swallows you whole, all twisted limbs and low canopy, dark even at midday. I made a decision. I stepped off the trail into the brush, moved about 15 feet in, crouched behind a boulder, and went completely still. I want you to understand how quiet it was out there. No wind, no birds. Just my own breathing, which I was trying to control, and the distant sound of his boots on the hardpack getting closer. His footsteps stopped at the exact spot where I'd stepped off the trail. I counted to 10, 15, 20. Then I heard the brush begin to crack. Not the random cracking of someone stumbling through. Slow, deliberate steps, each one placed carefully. He was following me into the thicket. He'd seen exactly where I'd gone in, or he'd tracked the broken stems or something worse. And now he was coming. I ran. That's it. That's all I did. I didn't think about direction or the trail or my footing. I exploded out the far side of that thicket and ran through the woods with a full pack until my lungs felt like wet paper bags, until the trees thinned and I hit a gravel access road I didn't recognize, and I followed it until I smelled campfire smoke and heard voices and nearly collapsed into a group campsite where a family from Roanoke was making chili over a camp stove. I sat with them for 2 hours without fully explaining why. They were kind enough not to push. I never saw him again. I hiked out the next morning in a group of 4 other backpackers I recruited from that campsite, telling them I'd rolled my ankle and needed the moral support. What I keep coming back to, what I still can't shake at 2 in the morning when the house is too quiet, is that the distance never changed. 50 feet, every single time. In the time it takes you to close 50 feet of trail, you can't outrun anything that's already decided to follow you. You can only hope it decides to stop. The man in the rhododendrons apparently decided to stop. I still don't know why. The archive has a second file. A solo backpacker woke up on day 4 of a remote Georgia trip and found something sitting on a rock outside her tent, something that had not been there when she went to sleep, and what was on it proved she was never alone. The camera was sitting perfectly centered on the flat granite slab I used as a cook surface, and I knew, before I even picked it up, that whatever was on it was going to be bad. I've been solo backpacking for 12 years. I've done the Colorado Trail, the Wonderland route, a dozen stretches of the AT. I track my water sources. I hang my bear bag by the book. I tell 2 people my exact itinerary before I leave the trailhead. Safety is not something I treat casually. which is exactly why what happened in the Chattahoochee National Forest in northern Georgia on the fourth morning of a remote 5-day trip still feels like a violation I haven't fully recovered from. It was early May 2021. I was camped on a flat bench above a tributary of the Conasauga River, deep enough in that I hadn't seen another person in 3 days. The kind of remoteness that usually fills me with a specific, clean kind of peace. I unzipped my tent at first light to start filtering water, and that's when I saw it. A small digital camera. One of those older Canon point-and-shoots, gray and scuffed, sitting dead center on the granite slab, perfectly upright, perfectly intentional. I hadn't heard a sound all night. Not a footstep, not a voice, not even a branch shift, and I am a light sleeper. I lie awake at the sound of raccoons. Someone had walked into my campsite in total darkness and placed that camera on that rock without making a single noise I detected. I stood there in the cold morning air for probably 2 full minutes, just staring at it. Then I made the decision I'm still not sure was the right one. I picked it up. The first 20-something photos were unremarkable. Trail landscapes, a blurry creek crossing, a ridge view I half recognized. I almost convinced myself it was a lost camera, dropped by another hiker, somehow found its way to my cook rock through some chain of coincidences I didn't need to think too hard about. Then, photo 23, me. Taken from above and to the right, maybe 60 yards out, compressed by a zoom lens. I was crossing a log bridge over a creek on day 2, both trekking poles out, not looking up. The resolution was sharp enough that I could read the brand name on my pack's hip belt. The next 11 photos were the same, me resting on a boulder at lunch, me filtering water from a spring, kneeling with my back to the tree line. Me on a ridge with my map out, the late afternoon light catching my face from the left. Whoever took these had been moving parallel to me, staying just outside my sightline for at least 3 days. But the last photo. I need you to understand what the last photo was. It was my face, close enough to show individual eyelashes, taken through the mesh panel of my tent door, from outside, in the dark. My sleeping bag was pulled to my chin. My mouth was slightly open. I was completely, vulnerably asleep, and someone was standing inches from my tent, close enough that I should have felt their breath through the mesh. And they left the camera on the rock, like a trophy. I didn't make breakfast. I broke down my tent in under 4 minutes. I've timed myself since. I've never matched it. Stuffed everything in my pack in no particular order, and started hiking. I did 18 miles that day. I know because my GPS tracked it. 18 miles on trail food and adrenaline, until I hit a 2-lane highway outside Ellijay and flagged down a pickup truck driven by a retired schoolteacher named Doris, who drove me to a gas station without asking a single question. The police took the camera. A detective in Gilmer County called me 3 weeks later to tell me they hadn't identified anyone. The case is technically still open. I haven't camped in Georgia since. I'm not sure I will. Because the thing I keep thinking about isn't the photos of me on the trail. It's the fact that he was there, in the dark, at my tent door, and chose to leave the camera instead of doing something else. I don't know what that choice cost him. I know what not understanding it costs me. File 3 came from the Greenbrier River in West Virginia. A solo kayaker thought the river gave him safety. Distance from the banks, distance from whatever was in the trees. He was wrong. The boot prints were directly below where he slept. The boot prints were fresh, deep pressed into the mud, still waterlogged at the edges, directly below the ledge where my tent had been. Whoever left them had been standing in the river in the dark, looking up at me, and I had slept through the whole thing. Solo kayak camping is something I've done for 8 years on rivers across the mid-Atlantic. The Shenandoah, the New, the Cacapon. The draw is exactly what you'd think. You can reach campsites no foot traveler can access, island bars and high banks tucked behind river bends, invisible from any road. The river feels like protection. The Greenbrier taught me that the river is not protection. The river is a corridor, and if something wants to follow you down it, you have absolutely nowhere to go. It was late June 2019. I was 3 days into a 40-mile solo float through Pocahontas County, West Virginia, in a loaded sea kayak, camping on whatever elevated bank looked defensible each night. Day 2 was when I first noticed it. Snapped branches on the left bank, pushed down grass along a flat section in a line parallel to my direction of travel. The pattern moved with me. I'd paddle a quarter mile and the disturbance on the bank would resume at the same interval ahead, like whatever was causing it knew where I was going. I told myself black bear. There are plenty of them in the Greenbrier watershed. Bears investigate river corridors for food. I told myself that for about an hour, until the movement stopped being animal random and became something else, too linear, too deliberate, too consistent with the rhythm of a biped, walking at a comfortable pace. I paddled harder. The movement on the bank kept up, without apparent effort. That night I chose a camp on a high clay bank, 12 feet above the waterline, eroded into a vertical face that would be genuinely difficult to climb in the dark. I made dinner, hung my food, checked my camp from every angle before dark. I felt reasonably secure. I was wrong, and I think part of me knew it even then. At somewhere between 2:30 and 3 in the morning, I came fully awake, not gradually, instantly, like a switch thrown. The river below the bank was making a sound that didn't belong to the river. Rhythmic, heavy, intentional. The sound of boots wading through knee-deep moving water, one step at a time, slow and deliberate, directly below my position. The splashing stopped. For 10 minutes. I counted to 60 10 times. I needed something to do with my mind. I lay rigid in my sleeping bag and listened to the silence of someone standing in dark water beneath me, unmoving, looking up at the ledge where my tent was glowing faintly from the moonlight. No sound, no voice, no movement, just the river sliding past and the presence of something in it that wasn't moving with the current. Then the footsteps resumed, slow and unhurried, wading back upstream. And then nothing. I did not sleep again. I lay there until the sky went gray and the birds started, and then I unzipped my tent and looked over the edge of the bank. The prints were the size of a large man's work boot. 6 of them, pressed deep into the soft clay at the waterline, directly below my tent's position. The spacing of the prints was measured, patient. Whoever stood there had not shifted their weight or repositioned once. I paddled 22 miles that day without stopping for lunch. My shoulders were damaged enough that I needed physical therapy in August. I got off the river at the first road bridge I hit and sat on the guardrail until a passing truck gave me a ride to a gas station. Here is the thing I've told people and watched them fail to fully absorb. The river isn't an escape. You think you're untouchable on the water. You think the banks create distance. What they actually do is put you on display. You're a moving object in an open channel, and anything on either bank can watch you pass and know exactly where you're going to stop when the light runs out. I don't kayak camp alone anymore. I'm not sure that's enough. The archive has a 4th file. 2 hikers in the southern Appalachians found a fully packed backpack leaning against a tree, miles from any trailhead. Inside, it was a hand-drawn map, and on the map, 3 words that made them leave everything behind. The map was drawn in careful, deliberate handwriting, the kind of penmanship someone practices, and at the bottom of the X, in letters that didn't waver, were 3 words, "Don't come here." My buddy Leo and I have been hiking together since college. We're not careless people. We plan, we prep, we carry a satellite communicator on every backcountry trip. But on the 3rd day of a 4-day section through the Citico Creek Wilderness and the Chattahoochee National Forest, deep in the southern Appalachians of Tennessee, we found something that broke through every rational framework we had. We were maybe 7 miles from the nearest trailhead, on a faint use trail following a creek drainage, when Leo stopped ahead of me and said, "Not urgently, just flatly. There's a pack here." It was an older internal frame pack, the kind serious long-distance hikers used in the 90s, forest green with aluminum stays, propped deliberately against a white oak, upright, compression strap cinched tight, not dropped, not fallen from a shoulder, placed, the way you'd set something down if you intended to come back for it, except there was no camp, no fire ring, no tent footprint, no filtered water setup. Nothing to explain why a fully loaded pack was sitting in that specific spot, as if it had always been there. We circled it for a minute without touching it. The forest around us was doing what forests do. Light through canopy, creek sound, a woodpecker somewhere, and none of it covered the feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong about this object in this place. Leo opened the top pocket. He's always been the braver one. Inside, a compact first aid kit, a folded topo map, and a small yellow waterproof notebook. He handed me the topo first. It was hand-drawn on graph paper, surprisingly detailed. A creek drainage, a ridgeline, a series of elevation marks, and a trail we didn't recognize, annotating our approximate position relative to a set of landmarks we did recognize. Someone had studied this terrain closely. The X was marked at a specific point on the unfamiliar ridge. Heavy pressure, like whoever drew it had gone over it multiple times. And beneath it, in that careful handwriting, the 3 words, "Don't come here," not a warning to themselves. The phrasing isn't how you write something for your own reference. It's how you write something for whoever finds it after you. We stood there in the creek drainage with the map between us and said nothing for probably 30 seconds. Then Leo folded it back up, put it in the top pocket, zipped the pocket shut, and we backed away from the pack the way you'd back away from something you're not sure is stable. We didn't discuss it on the trail out. We barely spoke at all. We did 7 miles in just under 3 hours, which is not a pace either of us usually maintains on technical terrain, and we drove 2 hours home without stopping for dinner. I called the Chattahoochee National Forest Ranger Station 2 days later. They patched me through to the Polk County Sheriff's Office. I gave the GPS coordinates I'd marked. A week after that, a detective called me back. The pack had belonged to a man in his mid-40s from Knoxville. His hiking partner had reported him missing after he'd wandered off trail on a solo day hike 4 days before we found the pack. They found the pack exactly where I'd said. They never found him. I've turned the map over in my mind so many times I've worn grooves in my thinking. Was it a warning to keep people away from where something had happened to him? Or was it directions, a record of where he was going, and the 3 words were his assessment of what he found when he got there? The detective didn't offer a theory. I've never stopped developing mine. Whatever is at that X on that ridge in the Citico Creek Wilderness, I know one thing with certainty. The man who drew that map had seen it, and he wrote those words in letters that did not waver. The final file in tonight's archive is the one I debated including. A solo hiker in the Jefferson National Forest spent 12 days with something that wasn't interested in being seen, only in being felt. The bones were still warm when she found them. The bones were arranged in a pattern I've never been able to find a name for, geometric, deliberate, stripped completely clean, and the ash they were laid in was still radiating heat. Someone had been there minutes before I arrived, maybe less. I planned the Jefferson National Forest trip as a graduation gift to myself. 3 weeks, solo, through the George Washington and Jefferson National Forests in southwestern Virginia, starting at a trailhead off Route 16 outside Marion. I'd finished my master's degree in May 2023. I had the time, I had the fitness, I had the gear. What I didn't have was any understanding of what the Jefferson does to you after dark, or what lives in it that doesn't want to be seen. By day 9, I was starting to understand. It started small. The way these things always start small, so you can rationalize them individually and miss the pattern they're building. Day 7, a yellowed plastic doll, the kind that used to come in cereal boxes in the 90s, sitting perfectly upright in the center of the trail ahead of me, facing away from my direction of travel. I almost stepped on it. I stood and looked at it for a long moment, then walked around it. I told myself, kids play in these woods too, day hikers, trail families, someone dropped it. Day 8, I woke up to find my bare hang cord untied and coiled in a neat circle on the ground directly below the hang point. My food bag was still up in the tree, undisturbed. The cord takes a specific sequence of knots to set up. It had been untied, not cut or broken, and recoiled with a tidiness that felt pointed. I told myself the knot slipped, the cord fell, the slight wind that moved through camp that night coiled it coincidentally. I told myself a lot of things that week. Day 9, 2:07 a.m. I know the time because I checked my watch when the voice started. It was a single human voice coming from somewhere in the tree line beyond the northern edge of my camp, maybe 60 or 70 yards out. Not loud, not urgent. A steady, low murmur. The cadence of someone talking continuously. Sentences, pauses, more sentences, with no response from anyone else, no second voice. Just the one, talking in the dark at 2 in the morning for 6 or 7 minutes, with the calm, unhurried rhythm of someone reading aloud from something. Then it stopped, and the forest went back to being a forest, and I lay there until morning, too rigid to sleep. I told myself it was a hiker with insomnia talking on a phone. I told myself there are people who talk in their sleep loudly enough to carry across a camp. I told myself these things with decreasing conviction. The doll, the rope, the voice. I was cataloging them, which meant I already knew they were connected. Day 12 is when the cataloging stopped, and the knowing began. I came around a bend in the trail mid-morning and found a campsite I hadn't seen on any map. A flat clearing, a rock ring fire pit, no tent or gear. The fire in the pit was out, the ash white and spread, but when I held my palm 18 inches above it, I could feel the heat still rising. Someone had left that fire recently, within the last hour, maybe less. Arranged in the center of the ash, undisturbed by the disbanding of the fire, were bones. Small animal bones, rabbit or squirrel, I think, completely stripped and bleached looking, positioned in a pattern that was clearly deliberate. Intersecting lines, a central focal point, subsidiary groupings at what felt like cardinal angles, the kind of arrangement that suggests someone knows the difference between the pattern they're making and a random scatter. The kind of arrangement you make when you want someone to understand you've been watching them and you want them to understand it precisely. I didn't make a fire for the remaining 9 days. I barely slept. I pushed mileage until my feet were in a condition I'd rather not describe, because moving felt like the only agency I had left. The paranoia isn't something I can fully convey. It's a specific texture. The feeling of being an object in someone else's attention, of every tree line being a screen, and you being the only thing on either side of it that's visible. I hit the parking lot off Route 16 on day 21, threw my pack in my trunk, locked my doors, and sat in the driver's seat watching the tree line where the trail mouth opened onto the lot. I watched it for 40 minutes before I turned the key. Nothing came out of it. But something in the way the shadows sat at the edge of those trees, something in the quality of the stillness at that opening, made me feel like the watching hadn't stopped just because I'd reached a parking lot. The doll was facing away from me. I've thought about that detail more than any other. Not toward me, away, like it was positioned to watch whatever was coming from the direction I was heading. I don't know if it was a warning or an invitation. I don't know which one is worse. The archive is closed for tonight. If something in these files stayed with you, if you've seen something in the backcountry you haven't been able to explain, submit it. We read everything. The next file is already waiting. It's on your screen right now.